Josh from soccerreviewsforyou.com, bringing you a comparison video today of the signature models of what many people would argue are the two best players in the world at the moment, Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi, which means, of course, we're going to be comparing the Adidas Messi 15.1 and the Nike CR7 Mercurial Superfly 4. So in the video, we're going to be comparing the two when it comes to touch, the uppers. We're going to talk about the sole plates, the stud patterns, take a look at the weight of the shoe, as well as talk about how these things fit and feel on feet. So if you're interested in learning more about both of these two shoes, perhaps learning which of the two is going to be best suited for what you like personally in a pair of soccer shoes, this video should help you out tremendously. So again, if you're interested in learning more, stick around, watch the entire video. And with that being said, let's get right into the comparison. Before we even talk about the shoes and what they have to offer, I want to quickly point out this particular fact about both the CR7 Superfly 4 and the Messi 15.1. A lot of people seem to be under the impression that Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi are directly involved in the design of their personal signature models or signature colorways, and to a certain extent that is true. With that being said, they're not the ones designing the shoes. They're not the ones really deciding the final product. That's down to the companies themselves. And what's a great example of that is the fact that neither Ronaldo or Messi wear the version of the shoe that you can actually buy in the store. Cristiano Ronaldo wears a heavily modified version of the Superfly 4 that features its own unique shape that is specific to his shoe and a shortened collar and who knows what other differences that you can't actually see. And then Messi, this is pretty well known and has been for years, doesn't wear a synthetic shoe, which obviously has been what his signature models have been for the last couple of years. His version of the Messi 15.1 features a leather upper and also doesn't feature the Messi frame system, so they're quite a bit different than what you're actually buying in the store. So if you're buying either the CR7 Superfly 4 or the Messi 15.1 with the impression that this is the exact same shoe that those guys are actually wearing in game, unfortunately they aren't. The ones that they're actually wearing are custom variations, so just keep that in mind prior to making your purchase if that was going to influence your decision in any way at all. So with that out of the way, let's compare the uppers, because both of these two shoes are pretty different from each other when it comes to actual feel and touch on the ball. Starting off with the Superfly 4, it obviously features a knitted construction for the upper, a material that Nike calls Flyknit, and of course features their signature mid-cut design, which has been very, very popular ever since it first came out. In comparison to the Messi 15.1, the Superfly 4 features a softer upper, a thinner upper, offers a tighter, closer wrap on the foot, and I would argue feels a little bit more responsive as well due to several support elements that have been incorporated on the shoe. Another huge difference in comparison to the Messi 15.1 is you have a very consistent touch across the entire foot. It's the same thickness of Flyknit material. There's no overlapping materials because of this one-piece construction, and like I said, if you want that all over thin sensation when making contact with the ball, that's really what the Superfly 4 does particularly well. Whereas the Messi 15.1 features a more traditional synthetic. It's what they call Messi touch. And in comparison to the Superfly 4, it's going to feel a lot thicker, a lot bulkier, and just not as thin. Is it a thin synthetic? I would argue yes, it's on the thicker side of thin synthetics, if that makes any sense. It has obviously a smooth synthetic leather finish on the outside with a very slight amount of dimpling that honestly you don't notice at all when making contact with the ball, but the material itself is pretty soft, pretty flexible, no issues there in regards to comfort, but again, not nearly as thin as what you're going to get with the Superfly 4, but as far as uniformity is concerned, the tongue is made from a thinner synthetic material, and then you have the Messi frame system that is thicker rubber that adds a lot of extra bulk around the ankle and midfoot area of the shoe that also adds grip as well because it is made from a rubber material. So depending on what part of your foot makes contact with the ball, you're going to get a different type of touch. So the Messi 15.1 is definitely the more unusual shoe in terms of how it feels and fits on your foot. So it really depends on what you're looking for. With the Superfly 4, it's a thin upper. It offers that sock-like sensation on your foot because it is a knitted material and it is so soft and flexible. No overlapping materials. And it gives you that sock-like sensation in terms of just how it fits in general. A lot of this is due to this mid-cut design, which offers no performance benefits in comparison to the Messi 15.1, which is a low-cut shoe. The only purpose of the mid-cut dynamic fit collar is to give the shoe a certain type of feel, just that sensation of a seamless transition from your ankle onto your foot, as opposed to being a shoe that just feels like it's strapped to your foot, which is kind of the sensation that you get from a low-cut model. Is this better? Not necessarily. Is it worse? Not necessarily. It's really a preference thing at the end of the day. For me personally, I know a lot of people like the mid-cut design, but I still prefer the feel of a low-cut shoe. So in that regard, I personally prefer the feel of the Messi 15.1. So again, just to kind of summarize things and keep things fairly simple here, if you want a thinner, closer touch on the ball with a little bit more of a structured feel due to the internal supports as well as the Brio cables that run from the base of the sole into the lacing system, that's kind of what the Superfly 4 does really, really well. It fits nicely, it's comfortable, it's super thin, it's flexible, very natural feeling once they're actually broken in, and like I said, they're extremely responsive as well. Whereas the Messi 15.1 is kind of a more unusual shoe in that it's not too thick, it's not too thin, it's kind of right there in the middle. That is a little bit awkward for some people, especially from the first time that they put them on. It's got a thinner tongue that I'm not a huge fan of the actual material, but you do get used to it. And then you have this Messi cage system that Messi frame system that in all honesty doesn't really provide a lot of extra support and structure. You can see it's a cage that runs from the heel into the lacing system. So the idea is that when you pull the laces tight, it's going to pull on this Messi frame and kind of cradle the midfoot and heel area, locking it in place. And there's no heel slippage, there's no stability issues with this shoe whatsoever. I would argue that it's just as stable as what you're going to find with the Superfly 4, but with a lot of extra bulk. When you look down at your feet, all of this Messi cage, because it is so kind of thick and bulky and not attached to the actual upper, you do notice it. It's not necessarily something that you're going to feel while running around, but it is something that you will notice when making contact with the ball. So like I said, there's kind of a change up in the feel. It's a little bit thinner at the front and a little bit more bulky in the midfoot, plus you get the extra grip from the Messi frame itself being a rubberized material. So out of the two, definitely the more strange shoe, which I would argue is possibly why it's not as popular as the Superfly 4, whether it's the CR7 colorway or any other colorway. But that's kind of the major difference between these two shoes. For me, because I'm not a huge fan of super thin shoes, I actually prefer the feel of the Messi 15.1, but I would say that that's probably the most unpopular opinion because more people, I think, would prefer the fit and feel of the Superfly 4 over the Messi 15.1. Next, let's talk about sole plates and stud patterns because again, there's a pretty big difference between these two shoes. Starting off with the sole plates, you're going to find that the Superfly 4 features a relatively thin sole plate that's made from carbon fiber. Now, normally thin sole plates aren't the best thing in the long run because it can lead to stud pressure down the line, but because of the strength of the carbon fiber material, it does a pretty good job of maintaining a nice solid base for your foot to sit on with no issues with stud pressure whatsoever. You're also going to notice that while it is on the thinner side, it maintains a good amount of flexibility in the forefoot, which shouldn't be too surprising, but it's still nice and rigid and solid through the midfoot, which is exactly what you would want. So as far as just feeling good and kind of solid under your feet, you're not going to have any issues here with the Superfly 4. As far as the Messi 15.1 sole plate is concerned, it's quite a bit different. It features a plastic base, which you can't actually see. It's covered up by the white parts here peeking through, and then a plastic stud plate on top with all of these cutouts. So while these cutouts might scare a few people, there is actually plastic directly underneath that. So because of that, the sole plate is a lot thicker than what you're going to find on the Superfly 4, and also a lot stiffer, especially from right out of the box. So you may find these to be a little bit stiff at first, but after some wear time, you shouldn't have too many issues. And honestly, if you're looking for the more solid feel of these two shoes, you definitely get that with the Messi 15.1 more so than the Superfly 4. That's not only due to the thicker sole plate, it also has a lot to do with the thicker upper as well. As far as stud patterns go, not a lot separates these two shoes in my opinion. They both perform pretty well, but there is one main distinctive feature that may make you consider one shoe over the other depending on your specific situation. Now with the Mercurial line, obviously you're getting this bladed stud pattern, this being the firm ground variation, and it works really, really well. All bladed studs, they're fairly narrow in profile, they're fairly thin, I guess is the best way to put it. So they dig into the ground really nicely and give you that good multi-directional bite. So if you're just looking for very aggressive traction, for making quick cuts and change of direction, that's really what the Mercurial stud pattern is all about. And it's one of the best of any any shoe on the market in terms of providing that type of performance benefit. With the Messi 15.1, it's a little bit different, not because it doesn't feature bladed studs, because it kind of does, although they're triangular in shape as opposed to more rectangular. But this is an FG-AG stud pattern, so technically you can use this on firm natural grass as well as artificial grass, whereas with the Superfly 4, FG is strictly for use on firm natural grass, and if you want to use them on AG, it's recommended that you buy the AG variation of the shoe. So this is technically good for two types of playing surfaces, whereas this is only good for one. Again, it's really a preference thing. I would really make the argument that this particular FG AG sole plate from Adidas, is definitely more of a firm ground stud pattern as opposed to an AG one, for the simple fact that you guys can just tell it's an FG stud pattern. It's very similar to what we've seen on previous F50 models, but for whatever reason on the Messi 15.1, they've branded it as FG AG. So the studs themselves are just a touch shorter than what you're going to find on the Superfly 4, but they're all bladed in shape aside from the very back two studs and the very front two studs, which start off as triangles and then finish off as conical studs at the very end. So you're kind of getting a blend of modern and classic feel in terms of grip when pushing off, and that freedom to twist and pivot from the rounded studs at the very tip of the shoe, which, like I said, is kind of a combination of old and new types of stud pattern design. So all in all, both of these stud patterns work really, really well on firm natural grass. But if you're playing on firm natural grass as well as artificial grass and you only want to buy one shoe, the Messi 15.1 is obviously the better choice over the Superfly 4, but again, it really depends on what you're looking for. While it has absolutely nothing to do with the performance of these two shoes, it is a topic of conversation that I know for sure will end up in the comments of this video. So I figured I would address it myself, and of course the topic that I'm referring to are the aesthetics of both the Messi 15.1 and Superfly 4. I think it's pretty safe to say that if you asked which of these two shoes is better looking, most people would say the Superfly 4, not necessarily just in this CR7 colorway, but just the shoe in general. It's very sleek, it's modern, and has this mid-cut design. It's a really cool looking shoe, there's no doubt about that. With the Messi 15.1, I think most people would have the opposite opinion. It's part of the reason why this shoe hasn't sold all that well. People just don't like how it looks, and to a certain extent, I understand that. If you're going to spend a lot of money on any kind of product, let alone a pair of shoes, you want them to look nice. So if people don't like how the shoe looks, that's going to be the first thing that kind of steers them in the other direction from buying that shoe in the first place. So again, while the appearance of the shoe has absolutely nothing to do with performance, I thought it was worth mentioning that the deciding factor, if you are trying to decide between the Superfly 4 and the Messi 15.1, should never be the appearance of the actual shoe. For the sake of comparison, we're going to weigh both the Superfly 4 and the Messi 15.1 in real time using this scale. So keep in mind these are both in brand new condition and both the exact same size 9 US, so this is a very fair comparison. We'll start off with the Superfly 4, throw them on the scale, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.05 ounces, the equivalent of 200 grams exactly. So remember those numbers. We'll change the scale back to ounces, pull these off, and throw on the Messi 15.1, and you can see that they weigh in at 7.9 ounces, the equivalent of 223 grams. So that is the equivalent of 0.85 ounces more than the Superfly 4. Is that a big weight difference? The answer to that question is yes and no. I will make the argument that one, the Superfly 4 does feel a little bit lighter on your feet, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the Messi 15.1 feels heavy, because it isn't. It's still under the 8 ounce mark, which is a very lightweight shoe. But because the Superfly 4 has a tighter fit, because it is the more structured upper, because it is a more responsive feel, and because the upper is a lot thinner, it does feel quite a bit lighter than the Messi 15.1, but at the same time, it's a completely different feel, period. It really depends on what you're looking for. If you want that super thin barefoot feel, the Superfly 4 is a shoe you're going to enjoy a lot more. Whereas if you want something that is still on the thinner side, but doesn't necessarily lack a little bit of padding, has a little bit of grip, has some good kind of structure and kind of bulk to it, which again, I don't want to say as a negative thing, it just depends on what you like. The Messi 15.1 is going to be the more enjoyable experience for you. So the weight, in my opinion, is not an important thing to compare between these two shoes. shoes, because aside from the weight, there's so much else that is going to have a bigger impact on your experience with the shoe that you should be taking into consideration far more than the final weight of the actual shoes themselves. All right, so here is a look at both shoes on feet. On my left foot, the Messi 15.1. On my right foot, the Superfly 4. When it comes to fit, they're two very, very different shoes. The Superfly 4 is thin. It fits a little bit tighter, I would argue, than what you're going to find with the Messi 15.1, just to its more slimmer profile in general. And like I said, the upper is a lot thinner, which makes it feel more flexible as well. Now, I will say in regards to the Superfly 4, if you haven't worn a mid-cut model from Nike before, they're going to feel a little bit unusual, especially in the heel area. So that does take some getting used to. But once you're used to how these shoes feel, like I said, they feel lighter, they feel thinner, they feel like they have a closer wrap on your foot. There's less bulk to it, which is kind of what this shoe is all about. Whereas with the Messi 15.1, again, if you haven't worn a mid-cut shoe from Nike before, they're automatically going to feel more normal from right out of the box, and they fit really well. There's definitely no issues here. Not as tight as what you're going to find with the Mercurial, which again is not too surprising. The main difference is the width through the midfoot, but again, these are both still pretty tight-fitting shoes. But you will notice that given that this is still a thin synthetic upper, it feels a lot bulkier in comparison to the Superfly 4. So again, that's really the major difference. If you want that slimmer, more low profile, really thin feel on your foot, that's really what the Superfly 4 does extremely well. Whereas the Messi 15.1 is kind of an oddball in terms of it's a thin shoe, but it still feels pretty substantial on your feet, which some people just quite simply are not going to like. Even when you look down at your feet, there's a lot of bulk due to that Messi frame that a lot of people just may kind of view as kind of an off-putting feature, even though it's not something you really feel while you're wearing the shoes. But like I said, it does bother some people just how they look kind of bulky. They don't look as slim and as kind of close to your foot as what you find with the Superfly 4. Comfort-wise, I'd say they're both on par, although they do feel very, very different from each other. As far as width is concerned, they're both tighter fitting shoes, so if you have really wide feet, neither of these shoes are particularly great options for you, so just keep that in mind. Although I will say they should fit most people for the most part. You won't really get any stretch out of the Superfly, whereas the Messi 15.1 will give ever so slightly. And as far as sizing is concerned, they both run true to size as well. The Superfly 4, wearing my usual size 9 US, fit in the length is absolutely perfect. Same goes for the Messi 15.1. So again, if you're looking to order either the Messi 15.1 or Superfly 4, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. All right, guys, that is it for my comparison between the Adidas Messi 15.1 and the Nike CR7 Mercurial Superfly 4. At the end of all of these comparison videos, you guys always want to know which of the two is my personal favorite. And I'll say this, I really feel like the Superfly 4 is the better shoe overall. It's the more modern, it's the more high-tech. It does perform better, in my opinion, when it comes to responsiveness and just being a lightweight, thin synthetic soccer shoe. And for sure, more people are going to prefer the feel of the Superfly 4 over the Messi 15.1. With that being said, based on what I like personally, out of the two, I would personally pick the Messi 15.1. I don't mind the extra weight. I like the solid feel that it has. I like the little bit of grip you get from the rubber Messi support frame that they've incorporated on the upper, even though it is a little bit on the bulky side. And I actually like the thin yet slightly padded upper that you get with the Messi Touch Synthetic. So that's definitely an unpopular opinion. Again, I really feel like more people would prefer the Superfly 4 over the Messi 15.1, which is definitely evident due to the popularity of these two shoes. But for me personally, I like the Messi 15.1. Again, maybe a strange opinion, but that's what my opinion actually is. So that's pretty much it, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this comparison video. If you guys are kind of confused about anything at all, leave any questions you might have down below in the comment section of this video, and I'd be happy to get an answer out to you. If you enjoyed today's video, found it helpful and informative, be sure to support it with a like. If you're interested in purchasing either of these two shoes, you'll find review pages for both of them down below in the description of this video. On those review pages, you'll find high quality images of these shoes. They'll give you a better idea as to how they actually do look in person, as well as buy it now links, with exclusive SR4U coupon codes, where you'll be able to pick them up below their normal retail prices. So again, if you're interested in either of these shoes, the review pages are linked down below in the description of this video. Subscribe if you haven't already for daily videos on all the latest and greatest soccer gear. All my social media information is also linked down below in the description. And other than that, guys, hope you enjoyed today's video. And as always, thanks for watching.